and welcome to this theater talk for Yellowface by David Henry Hwang. I'm Ashley St. Juliette, teaching artist at Roundabout Theater Company, and I'm joined by my amazing colleague.
Hello, my name is Ryan Kim, and I'm also a teaching artist at Education at Roundabout. So excited to talk to you today about Yellowface, which is a comedy of mistaken identity debuting on Broadway this fall. A little bit of information about the playwright, David Henry Hwang. He's quite an accomplished artist. He's written many plays, musicals, dramas, operas, TV, film. His most notable work is M. Butterfly, for which he won a Tony Award in 1988, the first Asian American playwright to win that award.
And our incredible director is Leigh Silverman, who is no stranger to this work, as she directed the original production of Yellowface and Hwang's Soft Power. Leigh is also a familiar face here at Roundabout. She directed On the Exhale and Roundabout's musical revival of Violet, which earned her a Tony nomination for Best Director. Currently, she is working on Suffs on Broadway, where she also received another Tony nomination for Best Direction. Okay, so let's get into Yellowface.
Okay.
We're going to give you enough information, but we're not going to spoil it, right?
No,
okay.
Absolutely not.
So Yellowface is a semi-autobiographical play that features the character DHH, a fictionalized version of Hwang. After publicly protesting the casting of a white actor in an Asian role in the production of Miss Saigon, DHH discovers that he mistakenly cast a white actor in an Asian role in his latest play, Face Value. It's messy.
You don't do that.
You don't do that.
No.
And I'm really excited about this because DHH is going to be portrayed by actor Daniel Dae Kim, who also voiced this role for the Audible original recording. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited to see how he translates that work to the stage.
Yeah.
Okay, so Ryan, I'm going to toss it to you.
Okay.
You read the play?
I listened to the Audible production too.
Me too.
Yeah, it was great.
And so what came up for you?
I'm eager to see how it translates from that Audible experience to the stage, to watching actors in space, right? I remember the Miss Saigon controversy in 1989, 1990 as it was transferring from London to Broadway. The concept of yellowface is when somebody uses makeup or prosthetics to portray an Asian person if they are not. And it was rampant in Hollywood. Think about Breakfast at Tiffany's and Mickey Rooney's performance, which is cringeworthy. It's now kind of morphed into something called race bending or whitewashing. Mm-hmm. Think Ghost in a Shell, a Japanese anime film that the Hollywood version stars Scarlett Johansson. So it's still happening today in a different version. But back to this Miss Saigon, Jonathan Pryce had full prosthetics on in the London production. So when it was going to transfer to Broadway, David Henry Hwang, among others, said, no, we're not going to have that, right? Mm-hmm. And I, as an Asian American actor, didn't know how to feel about that. I was excited for a show that represented who I was on Broadway.
Yeah.
But at the same time, did I want to be represented like that? And did they really audition all these folks in the United States and couldn't find one actor to play that role?
Right.
And if that show didn't transfer, then a bunch of Asian American performers wouldn't have a Broadway contract. I wanted to see him perform this role that he originated, so I didn't know how to feel about it, to be honest.
And I love hearing your perspective about this because as I was listening to the play, I was thinking about how is this going to translate to the AAPI community now?
Yeah.
Right? This community has, in recent years, had some rise in Asian hate following COVID. And so right now there's a spotlight on this community with this show. And I think that the language in this play really forces society to have a mirror held up to them to look at how we're perceiving people through their race, right? Through their identity and how we're defining them by that. And I think that the timeliness and the relevance in the show couldn't be more spot on as we are observing diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think that we're actually advocating for that right now. Right. And so this is underscoring that same topic. And so I'm really excited to tackle this. I really am.
And Hwang really confronts this idea, and he illustrates it with this quote from the play: is race a construct which is still useful, or is it mythological? And as you mentioned, that's coming up in DEI, right? Do we look at the individual and try to not look at the race, or is race a part of that? It's also happening in our political rhetoric right now, right? Who can question your racial identity and who has the right to decide what race you are?
Yeah, absolutely. And I really loved how Hwang allowed himself to pull back the veil with this piece, right? DHH, it's about him, and he calls this play a mock stage documentary because he's really walking us through what came up for him and what happened at that time. And I appreciated that because we get to see in the show all of his feelings, all of his thoughts, and we get to see how he evolved from this moment using that moment as his anchor.
Absolutely. And in terms of like pulling back the veil, David Henry Hwang actually becomes the central character in this play, DHH, played by Daniel Dae Kim. And this is a device that Hwang also uses in his musical Soft Power.
That's right.
But let's not forget, this play is funny. It's a comedy. It's a 90-minute fast-paced comedy.
It's a comedy.
Yes.
It's a good time. And I love that for us, right? We're not leaving the theater sad. We get to listen, learn, and laugh. And I feel like that's the best way for us to get this information. It's not daunting. You can still have a good night. It's a date night. It's any kind of night. But come join us so we can have a good time at the theater.
Let's have a good time at the theater, but at the same time, tackling and thinking about and reflecting on these larger issues such as race and power and identity politics.
Right.
But we can look at it through the lens of comedy to offer a little bit of objectivity there.
Absolutely. And I think when you're not a part of a specific community, we need things told to us in a digestible way just so we can comprehend it, not to sugarcoat it, but just for us to really process the nuances of what this story is taking us through. I also want to highlight the pacing of comedy, which I think is really smart here, right? And whenever a scandal hits the press, everyone mobilizes. So you have, what is the media saying? Actors, people in casting, community members, allies, legal teams. This is a moment where it's like the world is looking at you, and so what are you going to do? And I feel like this movement had a lot of momentum, and it moved us onward, right? What was I saying earlier about how is art moving humanity forward? And now we have what's called colored conscious casting. And I want to read this quote to you by Teresa Irving, a former executive director of Theater Communications Group, says, "Color conscious casting intentionally considers the race and ethnicity of actors and the characters they play in order to oppose racism, honor and respect cultures, foster stronger productions, and contribute to a more equitable world."
Yes. I mean, think about the conscious casting decisions made in a show like Hamilton. Actually, it makes you look at the show and the historical events in a completely different way, right? Which is so important.
I love that.
One thing that I'm really interested in seeing, there are a bunch of different characters and different aspects of the time that are reflected in this play. You mentioned like legal points of view, the unions. We've got all these different cameos from prominent figures during the era, like Dick Cavett, Margaret Cho, Frank Rich, New York Times critic, Cameron McIntosh, the producer of Miss Saigon, and Les Mis, and there's a cast of 7 actors. So I'm really curious to see how the director is going to, bring the audience along on that story.
Yeah, we're going on a ride.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm excited.
Yes, I'm ready to buckle up and go. Let's do it.
Put it in drive. Okay. But I think earlier, I know you were talking to me about the character of the dad.
Yes, he's my favorite character.
Mine too. Okay, you go
that,
first.
that relationship in the show really stood out to me because it was so loving and tender and honest, and both characters were so transformed through the play.
He felt like the heart for me.
Yeah.
Right? He is the only only character in this story who says that they're from China. So when we're talking about this community, his voice is vital, right? And we start to hear the beginnings of an immigrant story, which I think will resonate with a lot of people. And one of the things that I want to highlight is this conversation that he has with DHH in the play. And I actually have a quote from that conversation. So his father actually says, "Even when I didn't know anything, the more I learned about America from movies I saw in Shanghai, even then I knew my real life wasn't the one I was living in China." And this really built a bridge for me. And I hope that it does that for the audience, because I think a lot of the times the way that we're not relating to each other, the misunderstandings and the misconceptions are coming from lack of knowledge when it comes to people's identity through their race or through their ethnicity. And so I looked at that and I was like, this is the anchor for humanity, because at the core, what I heard was a young boy who, like us as kids, saw something and was like, I want that when I grow up. You know what I mean?
Yes.
We're actors, we had that.
Everybody has that. It's a universal feeling, right?
Exactly, yes.
So I would love to leave you with a quote to think about as you come to see this show. And it was David Henry Hwang talking about yellowface to the Washington Post. He wrote, "That's really what I'm proud of with this play, that we can talk about race and people can laugh at it, because we don't have many opportunities in modern society where we can have a discussion about race and still feel comfortable enough to laugh. The play isn't about the race you pretend to be as much as it's about your sense of self, your identity. And identity is comprised of a number of different things. Race and ethnicity are definitely part of that, but that's not the answer. That doesn't define you in and of itself."
And I think with that, we'll leave it there. If you want to know more about this play and others, please visit our Upstage guide at our website, roundabouttheater.org. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you at the theater.